Hi, ever wonder what it's like to work another profession or live in the underworld? Listen to unsuspecting riders give a 10 to 15 minute personal masterclass as I spontaneously interview them as they enter my taxi. I'm your host, Simon Rushton, and this is Taxi Chronicles. Morning. Yes, we're back with another rider, another story. Today we've got a very good, I know this is going to be interesting. I've been talking to this lady for the last 20 minutes, half an hour, and she's explaining about culture in China, and it's very fascinating. And it's a mysterious culture as it's seen stereotypically, but it's more than interesting, I should say. So welcome, Sally.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you're from Hong Kong.
Yes.
But your heritage is Chinese.
Yes.
And you were speaking about what's life like in Hong Kong for you?
Hong Kong is an amazing place. I think it is really privileged to grow up or to live in a city. When I first moved to London and I used to live in New York briefly, it actually is a less, cultural difference for me to move from Hong Kong to New York to say my friends moving from Kentucky to New York. So it is really like this kind of hyper dense, hyper convenient, and it is a very magical place. And even today with the political situation is a little bit more difficult, but I think the day-to-day life in Hong Kong is still really, really amazing. And it's a small place in a way, like you can go to the beach in the morning, and then at night at like 6 p.m. you can have a dinner in the city center, and then 3 hours later you can go back to a mountain. So in that way it is a very nice place.
Just to confirm, Hong Kong's a country and a city?
No, we are not a country. We are a special administrative zone of China.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that means like you're a colony of China?
Yeah, I think a colony is probably the best way to talk about it. It's like we have our own rule. Some laws are separate, but we don't have our own army. So it's not a country, yeah.
Okay. Because I know the history, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that Hong Kong was given up by the Chinese during the Opium Wars.
Yes.
And it was to pay for the opium, the British drug dealers.
Yes.
Because the Chinese emperor sunk their ships.
Yes.
And they got upset and they said, to repay us, we need to take Hong Kong from you.
Yes.
So at that time, was it a country or what was it?
No, Hong Kong at that time was really, if I may, a shithole. Like there was like only 3,000 people living in Hong Kong. It was like the far end of China. So the historical power center of China was actually in the west and northwest. So during the Opium War, it was already in Beijing. And I think in the south near Shanghai, those are important cities historically, but in Hong Kong was really the border and no man's land, and the British only want it because they see it as a potential port. And also next to Hong Kong is Macau, which is a Portuguese colony that has been there since the 15th century. So I think the British only know about Hong Kong because Macau was already built by the Portuguese as this important port in the Far East and culturally quite rich.
So basically the British wanted to rival Portuguese empire.
Yeah, at that time the Portuguese are already declined, but at least they understand from the Portuguese that part of the South China Sea has some potential for trade, and so they really were seeing Hong Kong as an extension of Macau, but now Hong Kong is much more famous than Macau, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So rolling forward now, so we understand the history. We've seen a lot on the news, well, before COVID. Now we always hear about COVID. What was the issue with the protests out there?
What is the issue? I think, well, it started with this. So there was a teenage couple. They went to Taiwan, and the guy murdered the girl. And then he came back to Hong Kong.
Hong Kong?
They are Hong Kongese. They are Hong Kongese kids, like in their 20s.
Okay.
So the guy murdered the girl, and the Chinese government using this as a prompt to say they want to have an extradition bill. So like if you make any crime in Taiwan, the Chinese government or Hong Kong government can bring back the person to China or Hong Kong for to go to the court. And of course that is highly problematic.
Just to jump in there.
Yeah.
You say the Hong Kong government or the Chinese government?
Well, it's the
same thing or is it different thing?
it's the Hong Kong government, but many people think this is told by the Chinese government to do so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a puppet government.
It's a puppet government. It's a total puppet government because it's not an elected government. It's an appointed government.
So any officials have been approved from on high in China?
Yes.
Okay.
And none of them is elected anyway. So then people just start to protest and saying this is not okay. We don't want the extradition bills and stuff like that. And then it just basically the ball grew bigger and bigger because the police started to like send tear gas or arresting like peaceful protesters, and then it just become bigger and bigger. But yeah.
Just to jump in there again, Taiwan is separate but not.
It is separate.
It is separate.
It is separate.
I saw a documentary, and correct me if I'm wrong here, so I'm just kind of fondling in the dark from what I can remember, is Taiwan, China says Taiwan is theirs, but Taiwan says that it's separate.
Yeah.
Technically, I think the UN, I'm not sure if the UN, they recognise Taiwan, but they don't necessarily recognise it's separate from China or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes. So, yeah. So Taiwan, how do you say? So the current Chinese government take over China in 1949. Before that, it was the government that is currently in Taiwan that was sitting in Chinese government. And then the communists, the current government, defeated the Nationalist Party, which is the Taiwanese government, and then so the regime escaped to Taiwan. And of course, in the 80s, Taiwan democratized itself, so the current government is an elected government, has nothing to do, it's not the same people as the previous one. But so Taiwan consider themselves a separate power, but China claimed that Taiwan is part of China, so like you said. And yeah, I think the international recognition of Taiwan is very, very low, even though many countries still want to collaborate with it, do trade with it, but they don't officially recognize Taiwan.
Yes, they say we don't want to get in your family domestic,
yeah,
but we're happy to do business with
yeah, they're totally happy to do business with Taiwan, yes.
Okay. So you were explaining about this child, these two teenagers or early 20s, and the boy killed the girl.
Yeah.
I won't go into why. There's probably some lovers.
Yeah, very boring.
China wants to extradite him from Taiwan. Is that right? And they want to bring him back to China or back to Hong Kong?
Back to Hong Kong.
Back to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But obviously China's setting the rules.
Yes.
You guys in Hong Kong don't like that. Why?
Because then you would just say, first of all, if you go to like if you are in Hong Kong or Taiwan, the Chinese government can just say it randomly that you have whatever crime, right? Like we know a lot of in different countries that say if a politician or someone is political, the government doesn't like him, they would just say, oh, you will break the taxation law, we are going to bring you back. And then once you got into this taxation problem, you can put into jail for decades and decades.
Okay.
So people just sincerely believe that this is a way for China to just like forcefully capture anyone who is in Hong Kong or Taiwan into China to and just give them whatever crime. Yeah.
So basically you're looking at your human rights could be taken advantage of on the basis that you're being
monitored, yeah.
Monitored or taken into custody.
Yeah.
Now, would this law cover the rest of the world as well? Could China demand you to come back from England, from America, from Africa?
They that is where the
that part of the world.
that is where the country come from, right? Like if they want to do it to Britain, then the British government need to say yes, right? But because fundamentally China doesn't recognize that it's a Taiwanese government and the Hong Kong government is the puppet government of China, so they cannot say no. Whereas in China, I think this kind of extradition law exists between many different countries, like probably between UK and America. They have it because they are partners in many things. But because we, like as in Hong Kong and Taiwan, we don't have the diplomatic power, we cannot negotiate on what ground this kind of extradition bill stands. And that is where part of the problem as well, because I'm sure if Britain do that with China, they will get some other advantage about other things as well.
Because then in turn Britain would say to China, well, we've got a list of people that you need to give us.
Yeah.
China would go, well, maybe not.
Yeah, so they would. Yeah, there is at least there is a negotiation in there. Whether it's good or bad is another thing. Yeah.
I was So what's the outcome so far? We're coming up to date. What's the outcome?
So the extradition bill is kind of stopped, but then China took a lot of very, very heavy measure over Hong Kong in terms of they remove, because we have this kind of district council, so a little bit like here, the local council or mayor that is elected, and China used different excuse and different reason to either arrest or remove all the elected officials or the pro-democratic officials in Hong Kong.
So you have to. So if you're on that official, you know you have to start playing ball with the Chinese government, or you're going to end up in jail.
Yes, a lot of, actually last week one of them actually come to London to seek asylum. So they are not, they either will be arrested or they have to leave Hong Kong because either their family or themselves are in trouble. And China also passed a law of, if in Hong Kong you say anything or do anything that is deemed as affecting the national security of China, you will be arrested. And that was previously does not exist. Like previously you have to do something that is like a real crime, right? Destroying something or bomb something or destroy a person. But right now it's like
your words are just as bad as your actions.
Exactly. And so that is something insanely scary. And so no one can, for example, there was a slogan of just like claiming Hong Kong independence in Hong Kong, and that was a slogan that was really popular to use during the protest, and now those words cannot be said anymore. If you say those words, you will be arrested.
Okay, so they're muffling people, muffling the public.
Yes. So, and this is something like in China as well, right? There is a lot of self-censorships among people, so it's like to silence it. And
you've been to China?
Yeah.
As well as obviously being born in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
What would you say the difference is? Do you have, you're telling us about how your freedom of speech is being removed. From your experience when you were in Hong Kong and your experience when you were in China, is there still a major difference in what you can say and what you can't say amongst people?
Yes. I think I still think in Hong Kong, at least in the last decade, right, there is really a culture of politics, and we speak of politics. I think in China, people just don't talk about politics at all. So it's not even about censored. The newspaper doesn't talk about politics. So like here, our newspaper is all about politics, right? And it's never mentioned in China. And it's just something that is really weird. Like imagine you remove any conversation about politics from your day-to-day life.
But then some people say politics, everything is politics.
Yeah, everything is politics.
So if you talk about the price of fish, that's politics.
Yeah.
Everybody's governed, dictated, where you can fish, where the fish can be sold, the prices of fish, what kind of fish could have been fished. Like for instance, dolphins. Was it the Japanese or the Chinese? Of dolphins.
Japanese, yes. Yeah. Whales and dolphins, yeah.
And that's politics, definitely. So a lot of people are upset with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that respect. Okay. I had a conversation with a guy one time, he's Chinese, and he spoke about the one-child policy. And he spoke about how it's been really hard on the one child because there's so much pressure to be a success in life.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so it's kind of like a pyramid scheme, right? Because in China, there is also this culture that the youngest need to take care of the older people, and it's about practical thing, also about prestige. Like if your child don't take care of the parents, it's seen as something that is problematic with the family. And what it means is previously maybe you like it's one child, and then they need to take care of the parents and the grandparents, especially now Chinese people like the West live longer and longer, or even the great-grandparents. And if, say, you are a young couple, 2 people married, both a single child, you need to take care of 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 older people in your family, or even 10 if you're great.
So if you're one child,
yeah, you need to take care of
and
both.
You marry a woman,
yeah,
you've got to take care of your parents.
Yes, their parents.
And their parents.
And their and then the grandparents, right?
Yeah, the grandparents. So that's 6.
That's
6 pairs. That's 3 pairs of people making 6 people.
Yes.
And then on the girl's side,
yeah,
you've got the same.
Yeah.
So that's 12 people.
Exactly.
That's what the guy was talking about it, and I saw in his face, he's just offloading his pressure. He said there's such pressure. He said as he gets older, when he has a family, he's going to have loads of children. Because
it's like...
He said he just is everything. Go on.
No, it is quite scary, and also this is currently that generation where the grandparents and the parents still get married very young, right? Like it's still common for the kids these days where in people of my age that in their 30s, their parents get married in their 20s, and their grandparents get married maybe in their 20s as well. So this is the generation where there is still also a lot of alive grandparents. I think as it goes into the next generation, where more and more people are actually getting married and having babies in their late 30 or late 30s, maybe, and also that the one-child policy is released, it probably will get better. But the current generation is really the most fucked up one, so because there's so many old people in the country.
So when you say released, what is there a limit?
It's a total class structure. So if you got a university degree, you can get one more child. If your wife also have a university degree, so each of you can have more, so you can have 3 child. And so it is this kind of point system that the more prestige your background is, the more child you can have.
Then, sorry to cut you there, but statistically, and this is throughout the world, poor people always have more children than rich people.
Yeah, it's a problem in China too. Those people who can have child doesn't necessarily want to have more child, or doesn't want to have child at all.
Okay.
Yeah. But then I think because in China, there is still a large number of people working for the state. So for example, if you work for the university, it's kind of working for the government. It's not an independent institution. So in order to progress, like if you wanted to become from a lecturer to become a professor, they will check if you have make the right number of children, because it's part of how you contribute to the state or the government.
If you had one child, you can become a professor.
Yes, but now in this generation, you need to have 2 child because you are a well-educated person, so you should have 2 child instead of 1 child.
Oh, so you won't be able to go up the ladder if you haven't got 2
Yeah, now if you don't make 2 child, then you are like, what's wrong with you? Yeah.
So I'd be great. So I've got quite a few kids.
Yeah, it is kind of this kind of, because in English it's called one-child policy, but in Chinese it's actually called planned birth.
Okay.
So it's not limited to 1 child. It's more about how many children you have need to be linked to the national plan.
Okay. So what brings to mind now is, for those people who do have children and haven't told the government, what happens when the government finds out?
First of all, you cannot not tell the government.
You have a child at home, but let's say your wife, you love her dearly, she has She gets pregnant. She said, "I want this child." You say, "Yeah, I want it too." And then you agree that she's going to stay indoors or only come out in the evening, or do you see what I mean?
Well, if you find out, you will be heavily fined, and again, you probably will be fired from your job. And also the rest of the life of the child will be very difficult just because he cannot enroll in the education system.
Oh, they wouldn't allow him to.
Yeah.
So the poor people who work in the fields, they can probably have as many children as they want then, because they're only ever going to be in the fields. So the more people who can work in the fields, the better.
Yeah, but you don't have healthcare because the healthcare in China is completely nationalized. So unless you really don't care about the life of your child, it's really.
So right. So you've got an NHS system.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so what they're saying is your NHS is only one child per person, depending on your status.
Yes.
Okay. So, but if you're a villager, you still get NHS.
Yes.
Okay. So everybody gets it. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like. Yeah, you can do it in the dark, but it's very difficult. Like.
And have you known of people to do that?
Not really. I've heard rumor about it, but not really. And also because even in my generation, there is a lot of ways to do it, like through bribery. So, for example, I know someone who. The first child has some super minor heart disease that has no really effect on her life, but then they managed to bribe a doctor to write this child have this serious underlying condition,
so it may not live,
so they can have another child. So the most people would rather go for this kind of thing of just bribe a doctor for like £3,000 and everything would be a lot easier later on.
If the doctor's caught to be found out that he's bribing, what's happened? Is it like execution or jail or what?
I don't know. Yeah, that I don't know. But I don't think it's so bad, right? Because it's kind of like, it's very easy to defend that.
This is what it was at the time.
Yeah, it's a medical thing, right? This is like, especially with a child, like it's very easy to say that, it looks very serious at that time. He was a tiny baby and that kind of thing.
When you're picking your profession, what's this like? You know, we all go to uni here or higher, let's say college, and going up to higher education, and people pick whatever courses. Are there like quotas, like what that you must fill? It's like when I joined the military, there was quotas. There's a certain amount of people positions for chefs, certain amount of positions for drivers, certain amount of positions for mechanics. Do you see what I mean?
I think those.
That was it.
I think maybe in the 80s, but not now. Like not for a long time. Yeah, like that is not really. Maybe until maybe the late 70s and 80s, but not in the recent memory of this kind of things. Yeah.
I take it you have family who live in China.
Yeah.
So when you meet your cousins and stuff, do you find there's a gap? As like you could say a disconnect. We're family, but we don't think the same.
Yes.
And how do you deal with that? What is that like?
Well, but I think that is quite normal. Like you know that it's like that, and you just don't engage, right? I think, yeah.
Okay. So you're saying the areas where the differences is, whether it's political or something like that, you just don't go down that road.
Yeah, you don't go down that road, or you just think, oh, he is like that, whatever. Like, don't go into debate. Just turn around and don't think.
We're just here to spend time as family.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that is actually quite normal in everywhere, right?
Yeah. I just wondered if it's anything exceptional.
No, I think that's not to that level. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, how's life been for you since you've come to London?
Because I grew up partially in colonial Hong Kong, right? And then it was when I was a teenager that Hong Kong was handed over to China. So it has been not difficult in a way culturally, but What is difficult is London is at the beginning. I think I found London very dark, very quiet, very scary at night. Like,
Oh, is it?
yes, because Hong Kong is like Canary Wharf, right? Like always bright, always
Yeah,
lit.
lights, fast lights, stuff.
Yeah, and when I first moved here, I think at the first place I live is in Highbury, somewhere in Highbury, and it was like 12 years ago, so it was just dark.
I understand.
Like things close.
Would it be fair to say that Hong Kong's like New York? It's a city that never sleeps.
Never sleeps, never sleeps.
I get that impression that they're, very entrepreneurial, very businesslike.
Yeah, and we never get cold. So in New York, even at least in the winter, you need to sleep because it's freezing. In Hong Kong, the coldest day is probably 13 degrees Celsius. So you really don't have to sleep.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. In New York, you go heavy snow, so the winter is quieter, and in Hong Kong, it's just always, yeah. So for Hong Kong people, right now there is a lot of because if you have the colonial Hong Kong passport, means that if you're born in Hong Kong before 1997, Boris Johnson just released the news that from January the 1st, you can come to UK to live for 5 years and apply for citizenship after 5 years.
Yeah, the Caribbean community was very we weren't angry with the Hong Kong people, we were angry with the British government.
Yes.
Because our history is we've worked for you for free for 400 years.
Yes.
And you limit us, and there's only a million of us at the time.
Right.
And there's 3.5 million people
from Hong Kong
now in Jamaica. I don't know how many people in Hong Kong.
Also 3 million.
Okay, so how can you say the generations of slaves that built the city can't come, but another group of people who didn't can?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. If
You know what I mean?
I
It
totally.
shows how institutionally racist they are.
Totally.
To be honest, just to be open there, because that you can't justify that.
I agree totally. Like if one group can come, the other group should be able to come as well.
But we understand what I think personally it's a business move Boris is doing,
Yes.
because and it's trying to kind of get under the Chinese government, undermine the Chinese government,
Yes.
which is it's a risky game to play.
Yes. Yes.
I would say a very risky game to play, but such is life. Such is life. So what's the future hold for you?
Well, I think myself is more on a personal level. Like the job that I do doesn't really have any room in Hong Kong. Like Hong Kong is an entrepreneur city, it's not a cultural city.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so if you want to do culture, history things, it's way better in Britain. It is. Anyway, it is one of the best in the world to do this kind of things. So if I can stay here, I want to continue to stay here just because the type of job here is...
You can. Boris is just giving you a lifetime,
Yeah, but you still need to find a job, so like to keep the jobs.
Don't worry. If you're like what you say they are, but being an entrepreneurial city is very interesting. That's really interesting. What kind of things does Hong Kong produce? I know when I was in school, that was many years ago, everything says made in China. So what does Hong Kong give to the world?
Hong Kong don't produce anything since the 70s, but we are one of the most active stock market in the world, one of the safest stock market in the world. So I was talking to my friend who's Italian, like Prada and Gucci, all this brand. They don't list in Milan, they list in Hong Kong because they don't trust the Milan stock market.
So, the corruption in Italy.
Yeah, so Hong Kong is just a very, very, until now, a very stable stock market. Is one of the, and Hong Kong has a very heavy logistics center. I think it's the second biggest container port in the world. Yeah, so even just with these two things, it's quite busy, and also all of the things that is surrounding this kind of things like banking, finance, logistics. Yeah.
Well, it's been a very, very informative, interesting conversation. I'm really glad because you're the first person who's, let's say, Oriental Chinese who's actually agreed to do the interview. Everybody else has been they're happy to talk to me, but they don't want it on the thing. So Sally, much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
We hope you liked that interview. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to get the latest daily episode. Ever considered investing in the continent with the fastest growing economy and population on Earth? The same continent that holds 30% of the world's known natural resources? Then listen to our sister podcast, Africa Investor Stories, where you will hear real investors with real stories from around the world share their experience of investing in Africa. We post Monday and Thursday at 10 a.m.